Hey guys, Sam from West Meadow Rabbits here. Fall is on the way up here in New England. I know I have been basically invisible this summer. I've had a lot going on, but I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite parts of fall, and I'm sure you would agree, and that's apple picking, and of course how it relates to meat rabbits. So for context, I planted this apple tree in one of my pollinator gardens, which is just about finished up, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And the tree has been great. It's a Macintosh variety apple. You can see when I got it, it was probably about that big. And now this trunk is about twice as wide as what I could grab with my hand. So it's been great. It's just been producing more and more fruit. I actually need to prune it for the first time this winter. Hence with my 6-foot ladder, you can see it's way overgrown for an apple tree. I have a Honeycrisp, which is one of the more popular trendy apples for eating, but it hasn't done as well. It's just produced its first fruit this year, whereas this one's been reliably producing now for a couple years. And one of the great things about apple trees, besides all the delicious apples you get, is that they jive very well with meat rabbits. Meat rabbits absolutely love everything about apple trees. So we have a couple of nice little ways we can feed ourselves and give our meat rabbits a huge luxury. So right off the bat, I am picking my apples, and I'm not even close to through. We've got a bunch already. You can see these apples are kind of what people would call ugly apples. I don't use any kind of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, anything like that. I'm a very lazy hobby farmer. My philosophy is if something can't survive on its own, then it's not worth my time. That being said, most of this is cosmetic, little bit of damage from wasps. I would say probably about a third of the apples on this tree have been damaged by wasps. Most of those are still totally edible. You just cut around the wasp damage part. And if you're not into eating apples that way, the great thing that I love about Macintosh, it's great for pies, cider, apple crisp, you name it, so they will all get used. So that brings me to my first point here. When you're doing something with apples besides eating them, any of the peelings or leftover apple parts you have, give those to your rabbits. Now, I'm not saying to overdo it. This is not something you do year round. It's a seasonal treat going into winter, and it is kind of sugar dense, which is sort of empty calories, but there are valuable vitamins and minerals in apples. More importantly, the rabbits go absolutely nuts for it, and it's nice to kind of live with the seasons and mix up their diet as things are seasonally available. And it's a great way to bulk out your calories in the fall season. So if you were going exclusively or mostly off the pellet, apples can be a nice source of just raw calories if you were balancing your diet accordingly. I would obviously stress not using these as exclusive parts of their diet, but an apple a day for a rabbit is by no means unreasonable for a few weeks in the fall. So apple peelings, though, are even better. So whenever you're making stuff, baking, give those peelings to your rabbits. If you're eating rabbits, throw the core, well, you're obviously eating rabbits, but if you're eating apples, throw those cores in the cages when you're done. And of course, one of the most annoying parts of orchards in general is we lose a lot of fruit to wind, to insects, to animals, falls on the ground. So we get a lot of falls, as they're called, that sort of look like this. This one may have been me snacking, but this was an animal. This is classic wasp damage. And in theory, if I wanted to get super picky, I could take off the usable parts of that apple. Actually, you can see where I took a bite out. But a lot of this stuff probably isn't just worth messing with. You can't see this one, but it's bruised. This one's actually good enough that I might keep though. Anyways, you get the idea. So these apples, you can just throw those right into your rabbit's cage. This one might be good too. Nope. You can throw those right into your rabbit's cage and they will absolutely love them. As I mentioned earlier, and you'll know this if you do anything with fruit trees, they need to be pruned pretty regularly. These branches up here are at least getting close to 15 feet tall, so I gotta chop those off. And in addition, you will see branches break and fall off during the season that also need to be trimmed. So even though I'm going to be doing most of the pruning in the winter, that doesn't mean I'm going to waste those branches. So if you're raising rabbits primarily in wire cages, it's always good to give them some wood to chew on, both for mental stimulation, especially if you're not feeding hay, and also for teeth health to prevent their teeth from overgrowing. Rabbits absolutely love fruit tree branches, especially apple tree branches. If you ever feel like really giving them a delicacy, You can just snip off one of these ones you're going to prune in the winter, even though you're technically not supposed to do it in the growing season. If it's a small enough branch, the tree won't mind, and the rabbits will absolutely relish the fresh leaves. But even if you prune in the winter, the cambium, which is the layer underneath the outside bark, is still alive. It's green. So rabbits' favorite thing to do is basically they eat the entire bark right off and just leave the wood on the inside. So they absolutely love that. So when you're pruning your apple trees, be sure, whether there's leaves on them or not, to throw those branches into your rabbit cages. If you got a bunch of pruning like I do, you can cut them into 8 to 12 inch lengths and just feed those throughout the winter. If you keep those in a shed or a barn, or even in anywhere outside where they'll stay cold, they'll stay fresh most of the winter, and the rabbits will just absolutely love you for it. Fall coming, we have the last part of the season where the trees drop their leaves, and believe it or not, if you want to be crazy like me, you can collect those leaves under your apple tree and feed those dried leaves to your rabbits. If you followed this channel, you know I'm a big fan of leaf hay, which is popular, or was traditionally popular, in far northern countries like in Scandinavia due to the lack of grass in a lot of situations. So you can feed leaf hay throughout the winter, and of course, if rabbits love apple trees, they certainly love apple leaves. So while you're raking up your leaves, if you're near your apple tree, throw those dried leaves, make sure they're dry, into a nice feed sack that you have left over, and feed those to your rabbits throughout the winter too. They'll be very happy. So long story short, I can't say enough great things about apples. The reality is, if you're growing at a small scale like this and you're not manicuring the trees and babysitting the fruit, you're gonna get mostly ugly apples. But I mean, look at how many apples are in here. And this is just from a 6-year-old tree. And yes, a lot of them are ugly, but those are great for baking and all kinds of other things. And there's still, I don't know if you guys can see, it's getting late, but there's a ton more apples in this tree that I gotta keep picking. So once I prune it, get it down to a manageable height, it's gonna be great for me. The rabbits are gonna love all the extra fruit. The pollinators, which are already loving what's left in my pollinator garden, perennial sunflower and swamp milkweed, if anybody's wondering. Also some sage, but it's great for the wildlife, it's great for the rabbits, it's great for people. Can't recommend them enough. And it's so much better. When this was here, this was just big, empty, boring side yard like that. I just did 1, 2, 3 trees and pollinator beds all the way up. No maintenance, no effort, fun to pick in the fall with kids. If you don't have an apple tree in your yard, get one. And if you're not feeding your rabbits apple scraps and apple branches and apple leaves, make sure you do. Even if you're just buying from the grocery store, send those peels out to the rabbits. Hopefully I'll be able to post more this winter. It'll be kind of touch and go. If I get the opportunity, I will. Either way though, thanks guys for sticking around and watching. I really appreciate it. I will see you in the next one.